If you've been in recovery for any length of time, you meet people that some traditional addiction treatment programs work very well for, and they tend to be our success stories. But if you've been around recovery for any length of time, you've also seen people that cycle in and out and in and out, and eventually they drop off the face of the earth and we're not really sure what's happened to them or where they've gone to. Now, if you think about it long enough, you start to realize that there are probably a lot of people that end up like that. What we're going to be talking about is thriving and the future of recovery. We're going to be talking about some of the things that characterize this period of transformation that we're in now. We are in a period where there's a transformation in leadership and what it means to be a leader. We are in a period of transformation where there are a lot of new ideas and approaches to ministry and training for ministry, particularly ministry for this field. And we're in a time where there's an increasing need for high capacity and mature leadership. There are three areas that I really want to talk about transformation. One is methodology, and methodology is how we do the things we do. The second is training, and that's how we train people to do the things they do. And leadership is basically the people that do the things that they do. We're going to start with methodology. Our standard of care must be excellence. The needs of hurting people have to take precedence over our methods. If what we're doing is working very well, then we're probably having excellent outcomes. But if what we're doing is not producing excellent outcomes, we have to fundamentally re-examine how we're doing what we're doing. Bill W. and AA combined some really important concepts. When AA started, it was the most cutting-edge methodology of working with alcoholics that there had ever been in the history of the universe. It was so cutting edge that it has continued to help save the lives of millions of men and women around the world. Now, part of the genius of AA is that it combined concepts of spirituality, the disease concept of addiction, psychology, group work, and the very best of alcoholism treatment that had worked before. I mean, Bill W., if you want to call him that, was a scarfer. He scarfed what had worked well before, went through it, and figured out what might be effective now. Bill W. and AA learned from things like the Washingtonian movement, which started back in the 1840s, going back almost 90 years to figure out what was working. The Emmanuel movement, the Oxford group, which was a revivalist movement, and early concepts of alcoholism and the disease model. Nobody had ever tried to combine those in the way that AA did. We can honor the past while we learn from it. Taking a look at how we're doing what we do now to see if our results are really what we want them to be does not mean that what has come before is invalid, or to suggest that maybe we could improve it doesn't mean we're being critical. Change doesn't mean invalidating what's come before us. But if we're willing to make a fearless and a searching inventory, now does that sound familiar? If we are willing to make a fearless and searching inventory of our past, our present, and our program, we can grow and honor the past while we learn from it. New advances in research are telling us some amazing things. We are learning that trauma pre-wires the brain for addiction. That means the things that we didn't get that we needed to get to develop appropriately, and the bad things that happened to us that hurt us, both help pre-wire our brains for addiction. This is something that we were just learning in the past 10 years. We've also learned that most relapse is a right hemisphere of the brain issue. Relapse related to the inability to handle positive or negative emotions, relationships, and social situations or peer pressure are where approximately 80 to 90% of relapse happens. Now, one of the things we talk about in restarting is training the right side of the brain. Most recovery strategies that involve talking, that involve words, that involve reading, that involve planning are primarily left brain. So one of the things that advances are telling us now is we've got to shift where our focus has been. We've also discovered that joy helps rewire the brain in ways that are life-giving. We know that building increasing capacity to live in joy, which is about dopamine regulation, and being part of a community that is joyful, those things are components of essential recovery. Now, addiction is a catastrophic failure to achieve an adult level of maturity. So one of the other things we've learned is the development of maturity in recovery is not optional. It's not just about not doing the things we don't want to do anymore, but it's about becoming fully alive to become fully the people that God has designed and created us to be. That is a process of ongoing maturity. The last thing we've learned is about polyaddiction, which is the tendency to become addicted to multiple things at the same time or switch addictions in recovery. We're learning that the same regions of the brain that are responsible for alcoholism, drug addiction, work, performance, gambling, it's the same regions of the brain. So if we can begin to address those regions of the brain, we have a much better likelihood of not switching addictions. Now here's the bad news. Existing models of treatment have limited success. Time magazine reported last July that traditional approaches to addiction recovery succeed 20% of the time. Now that's really good if you're one of the 20%. I mean, if you were one of the 20%, there's nothing wrong with that figure whatsoever. Time also reported that AA is astonishingly effective for some people. That means there's about 20% of people that are having astonishing results. The sad part is there's 80% that are not having good results. The article went on to report that if you look at where addiction treatment was 10 years ago, it's really not changed much now. If you combine 12-step methodology with other things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which a lot of programs do, our results aren't a whole lot better. In one study, they found out about 25% of people were in remission. Now, there were people that improved. There were other things that improved, but the bottom line is, 1 year later, 25% of people were in remission, which meant 75% had relapsed or were using. Other studies put the rate somewhere around 28-25%. Some statistics put it about 67% that relapse within 1 year. What we're looking at is something on a range from about 20% to about 33% that have good, positive, successful outcomes. Now let's put a face on this, because we've been talking about statistics. If you've worked with addicts before, you know that they're not statistics. Let's suppose that someone has just shown up for treatment here, and you're interviewing them, and probably maybe their family's with them. So as a person who's in the helping professions, you're working with them, you're encouraging them, you're helping them become motivated for treatment, you are doing assessments, you're encouraging, you're helping them understand that they have this thing we call alcoholism, that there is a cure for it, there's abstinence, there's a program you can work. And he's encouraged, knows it's going to be tough. Spouse is encouraged, knows it's going to be tough. But you know in the back of your mind, there's an 80% chance he's not going to make it, if you've paid attention to your statistics. So what do you say to him? Well, this is a cunning, baffling, and it's a powerful disease, and you know, if you work your program hard enough, you'll make it. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. For 20% of the people. So he does what you ask him to do. He works his program, goes to his meetings. He leaves. His wife's maybe all happy. Chance for some family recovery. Maybe she's done some of her own codependency work. A couple of weeks later, guess who's back? Now, what do we tell them? Well, relapse is a part of your recovery. We tell them, keep coming back. It works if you work it. Don't quit. How many times do we go around and around and around and around before he doesn't come back anymore? Not coming back anymore means you're dead. It means you're in jail. It means you're in prison. You're on the street. You're homeless. I can see a face for every one of those. Is an 80% failure rate really the best that we can do? Is it possible that things can change? Now, back in the late 80s, I went to work for a program for homeless people, homeless addicts down in Washington, D.C. called Samaritan Inns. These people had courage because they had set up a program to work with homeless addicts, which are a pretty tough population to work with. They didn't have they didn't have any social support, basically. When Samaritan Inns hired me, they had great facility, great program, but they weren't having very much success, so they hired me to help them understand why this was happening. They kept very good records, and they gave me their records. They gave me all their data, and they said, tell us what's happening here. We went through all their data and discovered they were working with a lot of addicts and didn't really have enough structure, enough of what the addicts needed in their program. So now what they didn't do is fire me and say, get out of here, we didn't want to hear about that. What they did is said, what do we need to do to change this? The last time I checked, which was a couple years ago, they were running a 70% success rate. 70%. There's an alternative treatment program in Florida that is also running about a 70% success rate. Why? Because they were willing to look at what was happening with addicts and make a fearless and searching look at how they were doing what they were doing, and they were willing to change. But change is scary. The question is, can we have the same courage as Bill W.? Are we willing to make a fearless and searching inventory of our programs, methods, and our projects? Or are we more willing to say, well, this is the way we've always done it, let's just keep doing it that way? Are we willing to admit our findings to God, ourselves, and to other people? And are we willing to turn our programs, methods, and models over to Him and believe that He can restore us to sanity and our programs? How sacred are your cows? What are the things in your program or the way you've worked with hurting people that have been that way over time, and they're just that way because they've always been that way, or because the founder did them 50 years ago or 40 years or 30 years ago? Or because 30 years ago you did an outcome study that said we were doing great. What's happening now? How sacred are our cows? Because we will never provide excellent care for hurting people if we're not willing to ask this question. The second area we are now in transformation in is training. And training is about how do we prepare people to do the things they're going to do. Existing counselor training has limits. If relapse rates are running between 70 to 80%, would you agree with me that perhaps we are not as successful as we'd like to be? I mean, is that reasonable? Is it also reasonable to conclude that if we keep training people to do the same things the way they're doing them now, that we are likely to continue to get the same basic kind of results? And the results are good if you happen to be the one about the 20 to 33% of people that it's working pretty well for. But if we want to reach the other 70%, we need to make a fearless and searching inventory of our training methodology. If we do the same things over and over in our programs, in our churches, in our ministry, and we expect different results, well, we're just thinking like addicts. We're doing the very same thing that we're asking addicted people to not do. But because we're the people that are in charge, who have the answers, somehow we don't have to ask these questions about our programs. We need to build new standards. Current standards have led to the current results. Now, can we build on the excellence of current accepted practice, because not everything going now is wrong? Can we set standards for a new generation of leaders and treatment? Here's some suggestions. These are some things that we need to train this next generation of leaders to work with. The first question is, how big is your banana? Now, you may not have known that you have a banana, but your cingulate cortex on the right hemisphere of your brain is your mental banana. And that is the part of your brain that helps you learn how to get back to joy from distressing negative emotions like anger, like shame, like fear, like sadness, disgust, or hopeless despair. The bottom line with this is that if I am not able to regulate my own distress and return to joy, I probably won't be able to help you do that either, and you're likely to relapse. Second, need to learn to recognize and respond to my attachment pain. Attachment pain is the deepest level of pain in the control center in the right hemisphere of the brain. When I am in attachment pain or in painful relationships, everything hurts. So this means I have to learn how to recognize my attachment pain, deal with it appropriately, and work within my limits with a team. I have to recognize my attachment style. There are ongoing patterns of how I tend to relate to people and how you tend to relate to people. Mostly my attachments are secure. But if my capacity is stretched, I handle people like this. Now, I need to know that, because when I start to distance from everybody, it's a good signal there's something Ed's got to work on with himself. Next is, I've got to learn to recognize and operate within my level of maturity. One of the fastest ways for me to get in trouble and the people I'm working with to get in trouble is when I'm operating outside my level of maturity. If you're going to work in a restarting group as the primary facilitator, you need to have at least an adult level of maturity. Next, I need to learn to process and resolve the painful places in my life. Now, the older I get, the more I'm working in this, the more I realize there are painful places in my life. Getting older doesn't mean that things are rosier, I don't think. But it does mean I'm getting better at learning how to handle them and resolve them. Leaders have to be able to do this. And it helps to have a team when you're going to take on the giants. Teamwork is essential. You cannot do this alone. And the last is transparency. The people in my restarting group report that one of the things that has made the most difference is me being able to be transparent about my own struggles, the areas I'm in pain, or areas I have problems with. They told me, in fact, if you did not do that, we would not have listened to you. I thought that was pretty cool feedback. Last transformation in leadership. Thriving has changed my life. Learning how to train my right brain to build joy, learning exercises that improve my conscious contact with God makes all the difference in my life. It has changed my family. It means I don't lose it with the kids, not as much as I used to. And when I do, I recover quicker. It's changed the way I relate to my wife and the way she relates to me. Now, thriving can change you. The point here is, if we are willing to apply these things that we're learning in restarting and thriving, recover your life to our own self, as we're working with hurting people, we can all be thriving. If, on the other hand, we decide that we're going to left brain this, we're going to learn this stuff, learn the exercises, learn the information, learn the techniques, and apply them to everyone else but ourselves, we'll probably end up with the same results we've always gotten. Thriving, recover your life can change your life, and it can change the lives of the people that you are trying to work with. I can't tell you how excited I am about this. I don't have enough words. but I believe that thriving can change the face of recovery forever.